They told you that poverty was your fault, that you lacked discipline, ambition, or intelligence. When this channel reaches 100 subscribers, I'm giving away $2,000 to someone who's ready to remember who they truly are. Comment, "I remember," to enter. That you had to hustle harder, think bigger, grind longer, but deep down something never felt right about that story, because no matter how many hours you worked, how many times you sacrificed your peace, the scales never seemed to tip in your favor. Money slipped through your fingers like smoke, and while you struggled to survive, others, they thrived effortlessly, almost like they had access to a different script, one you were never given, one you were never supposed to read. But what if I told you that the truth is even deeper than you think? What if you were never poor to begin with? Not in your soul, not in your spirit. What if you were trained, conditioned, programmed to forget a sacred code that opens invisible doors? Somewhere in the early hours of forgotten temples and closed-door meetings, there's a prayer, not a religious chant, not a pretty affirmation, a vibration, a linguistic key passed from mouth to mouth in secret circles of influence. It's not taught in churches, it's not preached in schools. It's spoken behind closed eyes with breath held still by those who know how reality bends to language. This prayer doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it commands, it aligns, it reminds the frequency of life who you truly are. And those who know it, those who remembered it, don't chase wealth, it comes to them, silently, relentlessly. Because the truth is, wealth is not a reward. It's a remembrance, a signal that you've reconnected with your original design. And if you're watching this, something inside you is waking up to that memory. Before we go further, comment where you're watching this from, and make sure to like and subscribe if something inside you already knows this truth. You were never meant to beg the universe for scraps, but the system trained you to kneel, not out of humility, out of programmed submission. Since childhood, they fed you a script. Work hard, obey, suffer now, so you might be rewarded later. But have you noticed how later never comes? They handed you a life blueprint soaked in fear and lack, then told you it was morality. They chained your spirit with invisible doctrines that say wanting more is greed, that power is dangerous, that abundance must be earned. Through struggle, but behind the walls of glass towers and hidden sanctuaries, the elite whisper a different language. They don't pray like you do. They command reality with words forged in silence. They don't hope, they remember, and in that remembering, wealth bends toward them like iron to magnet. They've never forgotten the ancient prayer, the one encoded not in sound but in vibration, the prayer you were meant to know, the one they buried under centuries of noise. You've felt this imbalance your whole life, haven't you? A sense that there's a deeper truth just beyond the veil, that something fundamental is missing, not just in your wallet, but in your soul's alignment. Because poverty isn't just financial, it's psychological, it's spiritual amnesia. And what if I told you is that the poor aren't cursed, they're distracted, programmed to forget, conditioned to serve a cycle, trained to reject the very frequency that could dissolve lack forever. That's why the prayer was hidden, because it interrupts the loop. It collapses the false hierarchy. It reminds you that abundance is not outside of you, but waiting in silence beneath your conditioning. Someone once said, "When I stopped asking and started aligning, everything changed. Money found me in ways I couldn't explain." These aren't metaphors. These are mechanics, real shifts in the field of reality that begin the moment you remember. And remember this, the system doesn't fear rebellion. It fears awakening. When this channel reaches 100 subscribers, I'm giving away $2,000 to someone who's ready to remember who they truly are. Comment, "I remember," to enter. There was a woman who used to wake up at 3:33 a.m. every night, heart pounding, dreams soaked in symbols she couldn't decipher. She lived in a tiny apartment, paycheck to paycheck, praying to a God she was taught to fear more than trust. One night, she stopped speaking the words she was taught. She went silent, and in that silence, she felt it. A rhythm, a code, something ancient moving beneath her thoughts. "I don't know what I just said," she whispered after waking, "but I felt like the earth itself was listening." That was the first time the money came without a source. No call, no job, just a number in her account that couldn't be explained. And it didn't stop there. Her reality began to bend. People responded to her differently. Doors opened. She was no longer begging. She was remembering. This is not about magic. It's about memory. Ancestral, cellular, spiritual memory that was encrypted in you before the world told you who to be. You see, the wealthy don't just work differently. They think on another frequency. But even that's not quite it. Because you can't think your way into this prayer. You feel it, you align with it. And that's why you were never told. Because alignment cannot be controlled. It breaks the need for permission. It disrupts dependence. It dissolves fear. And fear is the fuel of the system. Every ad, every doctrine, every rule that told you to stay small. It was never about keeping you safe. It was about keeping you quiet. Because the moment you awaken to the truth that you were never poor, the system cracks, the illusion trembles, the architecture of control collapses. And that's what they fear, not rebellion, reclamation, the return of your inner authority, the reconnection to the blueprint beneath the programming. And the prayer, it's the key, a vibrational permission slip to break the false contract, a whisper in the language your soul never forgot, but your mind was trained to ignore. They don't write this prayer in books. You won't find it quoted in self-help guides or whispered from pulpits, because the moment it's written, it becomes still. And this prayer was never meant to be still. It moves. It pulses through silence, through breath, through the space between words. The monks who once guarded it didn't speak it aloud. They sang it inside their bones. And, before them, it was passed by those who didn't have temples or scriptures, only stars and wind and the memory of what it felt like to belong to something real. You've felt fragments of it before, in the way your skin tingles when you hear a certain melody, in the way a stranger's eyes can hold you for 1 second too long and suddenly you feel ancient, like you've known them for lifetimes. That's the frequency of the prayer. Not sound, but remembrance, the part of you that knows without needing to be taught. And when you tap into it, wealth no longer becomes something you chase. It becomes something that remembers you, but you were programmed to forget, not just the prayer, your own frequency. They replaced it with slogans, with rules, with noise. They fed you the language of doubt until you no longer recognized your own voice, until the sound of your truth made you flinch. Think about it. When was the last time you trusted your instincts without asking someone for permission? When was the last time you knew what to do, and did it without delay, without apology? That's not your fault. That's the system. That's conditioning. They taught you to trust credentials over intuition, to value logic over alignment. And in doing so, they severed you from the core that speaks in vibration, not words. That's where the prayer lives, not in your mouth, but in the space behind your heart. And once it's unlocked, your world begins to respond to you in ways that feel impossible to the conditioned mind, but not to the real you, the original you, the one who never forgot, just fell asleep for a while. There was a man who used to walk by luxury cars and mutter, "That'll never be me." Every time he said it, his chest tightened just a little. Not because he believed it, but because something inside him didn't. Something deeper flinched at the lie. He thought he was being humble, realistic, grounded, but what he was actually doing was casting a spell, a negative prayer, that sealed the doors he was born to walk through. One night he stopped. He didn't say anything at all. He just stood there staring at the life he was taught to reject and whispered, "What if I've been wrong?" That question, soft, innocent, cracked the dam. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that had never existed before, not because of hard work, not because of luck, but because he stopped repeating the curse. He interrupted the loop, and that's all it takes sometimes. Not a breakthrough. Just a soft break in the pattern. Just enough space for something real to slip through. You've been casting prayers your whole life without knowing. Every time you said, "I can't afford that," the universe heard, "Keep it away." Every time you thought, "People like me don't live like that," reality responded, "Understood. This is the programming, the silent hypnosis." And you weren't awake enough to question it until now, because something is stirring in you. A tension, a curiosity, a quiet rage at the lie you've lived under. And that feeling? That's your original self, the one not molded by fear or conformity, reaching for the signal of the prayer. And when it activates, you don't just think differently, you start to emit a new frequency, one that commands abundance because it no longer questions if it's worthy. You stop begging, you stop asking, You remember. And in that remembering, wealth begins to orbit you like a planet around its sun, not because of greed, but because you've become magnetic to what was always yours. The most dangerous thing you were ever taught was to wait. Wait to be chosen. Wait for permission. Wait until you're ready, until you've earned it, until the stars align. But the truth? The stars were never out of place. You were pulled out of alignment by a system that profits from your hesitation, a machine that feeds on your delay. Every time you waited for the right time, the right job, the right approval, you unknowingly delayed the arrival of what was already meant for you. That's not fate, that's programming. And the prayer they never taught you. It doesn't wait, it declares. It doesn't ask the universe for crumbs. It tells the universe, I am here, I remember, I receive. There's no room for doubt in that frequency, no space for the false humility they planted in you to keep you small, because the real you isn't modest. The real you is limitless. The real you doesn't bow to systems built on fear. The real you radiates truth, and truth creates. That's why they buried this prayer, not because it's evil, not because it's blasphemous, but because it works, and something that powerful can't be handed out to minds still under control. That's why this remembering only begins when you're willing to dismantle the false gods, the gods of scarcity, of shame, of waiting. That's why you're here, listening to a voice that doesn't speak to your logic, but to your memory. Not the memory in your head, the one in your spirit. You didn't stumble upon this by accident. This is a summoning, a resonance, a ripple in the code designed to wake those ready to reclaim what was always theirs. And make no mistake, you will be tested. The system doesn't let go easily. It will throw doubt at you, distractions, old loops dressed in new forms. But once you've heard the vibration of the real prayer, you can't unhear it. You can pretend, you can delay, but you'll never be able to fully forget again. The signal is in you now, and it's getting louder. There was an old man who lived alone in the mountains. No internet, no electricity, just pages of handwritten symbols and a silence so deep it felt alive. Travelers would climb for days just to sit near him. He never spoke much, but one woman, broken from years of trying to manifest her worth, asked him why her prayers never worked. He looked at her, eyes soft and ancient, and said, "Because you keep speaking as if you are still poor." That sentence broke her. She didn't understand it at first, but in the months that followed, she stopped pleading with the universe like a beggar. She stopped praying from lack. She began embodying the vibration of wholeness, not to get rich, but to become aligned. And when the alignment came, so did the money effortlessly like breath. You see, wealth is not something you earn. It's something you allow once you remember who you were before they told you who to be. That's the secret of the prayer. It doesn't make you rich. It returns you to the frequency that money responds to. You've been told the opposite your entire life, that money is evil, that you have to grind for it, that it only comes to those who bleed for it. But here's the truth they'll never say out loud. Money is obedient. It follows clarity, it follows energy, and above all it follows alignment. When you are vibrating in remembrance, in spiritual coherence, in the stillness where your false identity dissolves, money doesn't need to be chased. It seeks you. That's why those who carry the ancient prayer don't flaunt it. They don't scream it from stages. They hum it under their breath while the world watches in confusion. Because they know something most never will. The universe doesn't reward effort. It reflects essence. And the essence of who you truly are is not poor, never was, never will be. They just fed you a story, over and over, until you believed it, until your cells obeyed it. But that story is ending now, because something in you is starting to remember the real one. The deeper truth, the one they never wanted you to find, is that poverty was never just about money. It was about identity theft, not the kind they show you in credit reports, but something far older, more deliberate. They stole your knowing, replaced it with dependency, gave you jobs instead of purpose, gave you rules instead of intuition, told you that you had to earn your worth through exhaustion, obedience, and guilt. And just like that, the original you, the one born into abundance, was buried under layers of false roles and manufactured limits. That's how the system keeps spinning, by turning divine beings into economic units. But once you realize that your soul was never meant to deserve abundance, it is abundance, the script begins to unravel. And this prayer, this forgotten vibration, is not about getting rich. It's about tearing the mask off your identity, the one that was handed to you by a world that profits from your amnesia, because the more you remember, the less control they have. There was a girl who found an old notebook in her grandmother's attic. Inside were symbols, half-written lines, and a phrase that didn't make sense: to speak as if you are already returned. She didn't know what it meant at first, but she started repeating it every morning, not like an affirmation, more like a frequency check. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't visualize checks or dream boards. She just spoke from a place beyond language, as if something ancient inside her was coming back online. That same month, her business tripled. She got offers she never applied for. People said she had a glow, but she wasn't glowing. She was aligned, and alignment isn't a mindset. It's a return, a shedding, a tuning to a signal that has always been broadcasting beneath the static of your programming. That's what this prayer does. It doesn't add anything to you. It strips away what never belonged, and in that stripping, you become magnetic to everything they told you was out of reach. And maybe now you're starting to feel it, that quiet pull, like a thread being tugged from the center of your chest. It doesn't shout, it hums. It doesn't give answers. It asks better questions, like what if nothing was ever missing? What if every blocked path, every financial collapse, every betrayal, every no, was just the system trying to keep you from remembering this frequency? The moment you begin to question the script, to see the strings behind the puppet show, the old world starts to tremble, because you're no longer hypnotized by the noise, and the noise is their power. That's why they keep you busy, scrolling, hustling, reacting, consuming. They feed you distractions so you never hear the silence where the real prayer lives. And if you do hear it, even once, you become dangerous, not because you fight them, but because you no longer need them. And nothing terrifies control more than a soul that remembers it was never in bondage. You've always known this, haven't you? That there was something off about the way the world works, something artificial about the struggle you were sold. That's why you felt like a stranger in your own life, like you were meant for something more, something deeper, not louder, just truer. And here's the part that breaks people. You were meant for more. You are the more. You are the missing frequency, the forgotten line in the code, the note in the universal song that was silenced. Until now, because now, you're hearing it again. That prayer, not in words but in resonance, in the spaces between these sentences, in the goosebumps rising on your skin, in the ache in your chest that says, I've been here before. That's the truth knocking. And you can't unfeel it now. You've crossed a line. And once you remember this much, the rest starts remembering you. There's something sacred about the moment before, full remembrance, when the veil hasn't quite lifted but the illusion no longer holds. It's disorienting, lonely, like waking up in a dream where nothing makes sense anymore, except the feeling that you're finally on the right path. That's where you are now. Not broken, not behind, just between worlds. The world that was programmed into you, and the one that's been calling you home. This in-between space is dangerous, not because it will harm you, but because it will tempt you to go back to the familiar, the explainable, the controlled. But you can't unknow what you've felt. You can't unhear the prayer vibrating underneath every quiet moment now. That's how remembering works. It doesn't hit all at once. It unfolds. It rises in layers. And the deeper you go, the more you begin to see how everything in your life, and even the suffering, was part of the unraveling. The system trained you to mistake pressure for punishment, but it was never punishment. It was preparation. You've felt the cracks forming for years, in the jobs that drained you, in the relationships that silenced you, in the dreams that seemed to evaporate before they even began. But what if none of it was failure? What if it was all the prayer, moving in reverse, stripping away everything that wasn't you so you could finally hear yourself again? That's why the rich don't teach this, because true wealth isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you return to. And when you return to your original alignment, your frequency, the material world responds, not as a reward, but as a reflection. The real abundance has nothing to do with the number in your bank account. That's just a side effect. The real abundance is remembering you never needed to become anything. You only needed to unbecome the lie. And now you're almost there. One breath away. One moment from stepping fully into the life that was coded into your soul from the beginning. And now we reach the edge, the threshold, the point of no return. Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything. You've spent your life believing that abundance was outside of you, that it was something to reach for, to earn, to qualify for. But the truth, the devastating, liberating, unforgettable truth, is this. You are the prayer, not the words, not the sound. You, your very existence, is the sacred vibration, and every time you silenced yourself, every time you swallowed your intuition to fit inside the system, you dimmed that frequency. But it never disappeared. It waited patiently under the shame, under the fear, under the performance, until now. Now you remember. You were never meant to chase wealth. You were meant to resonate it. Because wealth, true wealth, is simply a mirror. It doesn't respond to need. It responds to truth. And the moment you stop begging, stop pretending, stop playing small, it floods in. Not because you earned it, but because you became it again. This is why they fear awakened people. Not because we fight, but because we stop playing the game. We don't argue with the old world once we outgrow it. We don't chase their approval. We embody our own. And in that embodiment, the matrix cracks, because it cannot control what it cannot deceive. And it cannot deceive someone who remembers. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were trained to be. You were not poor. You were programmed to feel that way. And now that the lie has been exposed, you can never go back. You can try. But the resonance will haunt you. The truth will echo louder than the fear, because once the real you wakes up, the illusion begins to starve. And the system, it begins to collapse, quietly, one remembering soul at a time. And maybe, just maybe, it starts with you. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. So now you sit here, not the same as when you arrived. Something has shifted, hasn't it? Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Like the sound of a lock turning from the inside. You're not just watching a video. You're witnessing your soul rearrange itself. You thought you came here to learn a secret prayer the rich use to attract abundance. But now you know, there is no prayer without presence. And there is no abundance without alignment. That old self, the one they trained to beg, to shrink, to wait, is already dissolving. You can feel it, can't you? The part of you that knows you were never poor, never weak, never broken, only disconnected. And the more you return to that truth, the more the universe returns to you. That's not a promise, it's a mechanism, one that's been working beneath the illusion all along. It doesn't need belief, it needs remembrance. So from here, your journey isn't about striving, it's about undoing. Peeling back the layers, unplugging from the noise, listening not with your ears, but with your frequency. Let silence teach you again. Let your body become the altar. Let your breath carry the code. And when the world tries to pull you back into the script, smile, not in defiance, but in knowing, because you've touched something they tried to erase, and now it lives in you. Not a word, not a ritual, but a quiet vibration, a hum, a memory, the true prayer, the one they feared you'd remember. Now the question isn't, how do I get rich? The question is, how deeply can I align? Because when you align, the rest follows. Effortlessly, inevitably, silently. You've already started. And now the world will respond. Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.